Hello everyone, I'm Ryan from 2 Car Pros, and today we're going to be taking a look at how to service a throttle body housing for a 6-liter 2002 GMC Yukon XL. This also applies to the Chevrolet Suburban and the Chevrolet Silverado and GMC 2500s. Any GM product really with a 6.0, this applies to. So the first thing we're going to do really is take the negative battery terminal cable off. You're going to want to do that before you do pretty much any repair on your vehicle anyway. It's just a good idea, especially in this situation. So go ahead and do that, and then we can jump right in.
So the first thing we're going to do is loosen this hose clamp with an 8mm socket. Then we can pry this intake boot off here. Alright, we can get that air intake boot out of the way here. And we're going to remove this little collar piece. This is really essential for mating the two up again, so don't lose this. The next thing we're going to do is take off this plastic cover piece using an 8mm socket. There we go. We're just doing that to make it a little bit visually easier on us. Next thing we need to do is undo our throttle cables here. One is the actual throttle cable, the other one is for cruise control. And we need to remove this little clip here. So you just get a nice little pick tool, a very small standard screwdriver would probably work great in this situation. And we want to keep a hold of that because this little clip here is what holds that in place and doesn't fall off while you're driving. And then you don't want to mess with this adjuster either. Keep it where it is because you wouldn't want the cruise control to be off. The next thing we're going to do is take the throttle cable off, and it is very easy. You just actuate the armature back like this and then move the cable forward like so and then push it out just like that. And now the throttle cables are no longer connected. The next thing we need to do is unplug these two sensors here, and you just pry the safety back a little bit and then wiggle the housing. You know, be gentle with it. It's just plastic. On a truck this old is going to be a little brittle, so just be ginger with it. Pry it back like that. Some people get lucky and they can push down real hard on it. I've never been one of those people. You could probably just use your finger too, but the shot for the camera it looks better if I use a little pick tool just like that. So both of those are now unplugged. We can move those out of the way. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is take this tube off here, and you can just kind of wiggle it back and forth, trying to preserve it best you can. There we go. Put that aside. Okay, the next thing we need to do is squeeze the top of the radiator hose here, the top radiator hose here, to make sure there is no pressure in the coolant system. You might be asking me why I'm doing this. That's because there is a coolant pass-through in the throttle body housing, and if you were to take off one of those lines without squeezing this to make sure there isn't any pressure in the system, it will squirt everywhere and burn you and do all kinds of icky, horrible things. So if you can grab this and squeeze it like this, that means there's no pressure in the system and you are free to open the coolant system. If there is pressure in here, wait until there isn't, and you can do this very easily so that way you don't get burnt. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is get some vice clamps down here on that coolant pass-through line, so that way when we remove it, coolant doesn't just go everywhere. And you don't want these on super tight because you don't want to damage the coolant line, but you want it to be enough so it doesn't just keep squirting coolant everywhere while you're working. So we're going to do that. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is grab our hose clamp removal tool. If you are curious what that is, I have a whole video up there in the card. You can watch about it. If you do not have one of these tools, which is understandable, most people don't, you can buy one, or you can use a pair of channel locks and some patience. There we go. Once our hose clamp has cleared the barb, we can release our hose clamp pliers here. Get those out of the way. And then we can get the line off there. Okay, so there are 3 nuts that hold the throttle housing in their place. They're all 10mm. You're going to need either a wrench or a deep well. I recommend a deep well. And we can just remove those. And we're going to do the coolant pass-through lines after that because they're a little hard to get to, and it'd be easier to remove if the throttle body housing was already removed and you could get to the underside a little bit easier. with that line off of there, and it might fight you a little bit depending on how old the truck is, you can see it is a coolant pass-through line, the idea being that if you put hot coolant through here, it makes the combustion process a little easier and a little bit more efficient, but it is a pain in the neck to get off, so that is something you're going to have to remove. But that gives us plenty of access to the other hose that was more of a pain in the neck. So we have a good angle to get that off. Now we're going to grab some vice grips here and pinch this line so it doesn't leak while we are working on it, so we don't have to drain the coolant. If you have an appropriate size bolt, you can also put that in the line as well, but I don't really have that, so we're making do with some vice grips. And now we can take this over to the workbench and work on it properly. Alright, now that we're over here on the workbench, we're going to grab some carburetor cleaner. Yes, I can hear you typing already. Wouldn't it be better to use throttle body cleaner? Well, I've been using carb cleaner forever, and it's totally fine. You can use throttle body cleaner if you want to. But what we need to do is remove all of this grossness. You see all that disgustingness on there? All of that needs to be cleaned off. Get some carburetor spray in there and really go to town and clean it. Get this as clean as possible. Manually actuate the throttle here. Get inside of there. Get it all nice and clean. The cleaner this is, the better the truck's going to run. Look at all that coking. Absolutely disgusting. That's not good. You should really be doing this every once in a while on your truck. They put these motors in cars too. But you can see how coked on it is. It's actually having trouble actuating. You hear that little stick? I actually have to put kind of a lot of pressure on that. You can feel that in the pedal on the inside too. It's very sticky. So we're going to go around and really clean this front and back. You know, I'm going to clean the outside of the spring on this side too. I want to make this brand new looking, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so after 20 minutes and a bit of elbow grease and a ton of carburetor cleaner spray, you can see what we've pulled out of it. That's what these rags are. This is how much gunk and coking was in here, and now we can take a look at this, and it's all shiny and new. We've also cleaned this surface here, and it no longer sticks, when before it was very sticky. It would be like here, and it would take a lot of force to open our armature, the throttle here, but now it feels brand new, so it's ready to go back in the truck. Before it goes back in the truck though, I'm going to put this line on there. I actually ended up shredding the other line we pulled off of there on this side here, just because it was so old and gross. So I'm going to put this line on now and then feed this one down to where it attaches on the engine and then slide this on. I can't really show it because the alternator is right in the way. If you have this truck, you know what I'm talking about. You're basically just going to slide that back onto the barb and have that nice like that. I just cut some new tubing I had laying around to length, and it should work just fine. So now we can go put this on. Slide this back here, like that. Put this behind the barb so you can feel inside the line. This applies to every time you put on any kind of water hose anywhere. Is you want to put the barb, or you want to put the clamp just behind the barb, and you can feel that with your fingers. You can feel the little protrusion, this little piece here, over here. You can feel that come out, because if you have it here or you have it here, it's not going to seal fully and you'll have a leak. There we go, just behind the barb, just like that, and then we can do the same thing on this line going down into the engine as well. And now we can put on this other coolant pass-through hose. We can even put this hose on last if we really wanted to, but I think it'll be easier if we do it now. Like that. Move our hose clamp here. Back into its stock position just behind the barb, just like that one. And then we can put it in its home. This next part I really can't show you just because of how deep and down in the engine it actually is, but right at the point, the tip of my pointer finger, right where this cap is, that's actually a cap I put on there. If you remove it, coolant will start flowing out of there. That's where that hose is going to go in on that. I'm sorry, I really am sorry I can't show you putting that back on just because, well, there's an alternator in my way. So I'm going to do that real quick and then put the throttle housing back onto the intake manifold. Alright, and now we can put the throttle housing back onto its place once we have that coolant line re-hooked up like we do. Just like that. We can route this coolant line back into its spot. Okay, and now we can put the nuts back on here, the 10 mils we removed earlier. Okay, so we're gonna put these nuts back on where we found them, and we're gonna do our best to not drop them. There's 3 of them, as you'll remember, those 10mm nuts there. Thread those bad boys on. We have the top one in place already. So what we're gonna do is walk them on a little bit at a time there. We don't want to put one on fully without the other ones at least being close on the tightening thing. Because if you put one on fully and the other ones aren't on at all, it'll become lopsided on that seal. Like that. And if I find a torque spec, I will put it on screen. And if you don't have a torque wrench, that's okay too. Just, you know, medium tight's probably good. It's just a 10mm, so it's not holding, you know, a ton of pressure there. And it's just holding the throttle housing to the intake manifold, so it's really just holding air in, you know. There we go. And then we can plug in our sensors. And they only really plug in one way, so don't worry about getting them mixed up. There we go, and those just plug straight on like that. Then we can move on to our throttle cable. So the first throttle cable we're going to put on is the main throttle cable. That's this one here. We're going to actuate that backward like we did earlier. Put that into its home like this. And then walk that back into its groove. And now it's in its home. It can't come out of there. So the next thing we need to do is worry about the cruise control, which is this cable here. And that just snaps onto that in place. And then we can slide that clip back on. And that clip is what holds this on so it can't come out of its home. Neat, right? We're going to take our little seal here and we're going to put it on our intake tube here. Just like that. And it kind of makes it like a little adapter for the throttle body housing and the intake tube. And then we can push that back into its home, and it's going to be a little snug. And then I tighten that up. Okay, we can reattach this tube we removed earlier. It's very easy. You just push it back in place like that. Replace the little decorative engine cover here. How else will people know it's a Vortec? What? How would people know?
So that's how to service your throttle body for a 6-liter GM product. It's pretty simple, self-explanatory. I mean, there's only really 3 nuts holding the thing onto the intake manifold, and that coolant pass-through line is a little annoying, but really not the end of the world as long as you wait until the coolant system is no longer under pressure. That's pretty much it. This throttle body in particular was actually probably the worst one I've seen in my career so far. It was actually so gunked up, like I showed in the video, that when you pushed on the throttle inside the cab, it would stick. So it kind of felt like the pedal was having a problem, but it didn't because it is drive-by cable. There's an actual physical connection there. It's not electric. So you can feel that inside the cab, and it was so gunked and awful and full of coking, it would stick just a little bit. And it was really annoying to drive with, and it also can cause a bunch of different problems, such as like an intermittent misfire. It can even throw random trouble codes, because the computer really doesn't have a trouble code for, hey, service your throttle body. It'll just throw, you know, like a P0300 code or something like that. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure to do so down below. And if you could leave a thumbs up on this video, it helps out my channel a whole lot. Thanks again for coming, and I'll see you next time.